China to give us the address on the day of shame. This is not by accident. This is because Dr. Libo himself, as an academic and researcher, has a history of battling against the forces of imperialism and battling against all the forces of underdevelopment and so on. The other significant thing for us is that we recall the past and we recall the days when the leaders of the national liberation movement in Africa were in the trenches. Those were the days when the United States of America, Britain, West Germany then, France and others, referred to our heroes as terrorists. But those were also the days when the heroic leaders of the liberated territories, including Mao Zedong, assisted our combatants, provided them with weapons, provided them with diplomatic support, and provided them with training in order to overcome racism of the West form and colonialism in all of its manifestations. We are using today to remember the contributions of the Chinese people, the contributions of the people of Cuba, the contributions of all the progressive states who stood shoulder to shoulder with us in our battle against colonialism, in our battles against racism, and in our battle against the stealing of our resources, the naked stealing of our resources by the giant corporations from the colonial metropolis. So Dr. Libo's presence here has many meanings. One of the most important is the effort to ignite the spirit of comradeship, the spirit of friendship, and the spirit of mutual understanding of the problems that confront the world with the Chinese people and with all other people engaged in this struggle. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are just about to move on to the next stage of the program. But I'd like to recognize a few of our guests. And as the time moves on, we'll recognize many others who have joined us today in marking Ghana's Day of Shame. First, I'd like to recognize Dr. Ofosu Ampofo, who is the political advisor to the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, and he's here with us, Dr. Ofosu Ampofo. I also like to recognize one of our own, Mrs. Margaret Nkrumah. Mrs. Margaret Nkrumah is here with us. And then, of course, everybody knows Professor Akila Kwasoya and Judy. They're here with us. Then there is His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Republic of Zimbabwe, who is also here with us. And our very own friend, brother and comrade, His Excellency, the Ambassador of the State of Palestine, is here with us. Of course, there's a Cubanito, whatever it is, Cubanito in our presence, a fresh member of parliament. The member of parliament for Garu is here with us. And please, Honorable, salute. We shall continue to introduce a lot more people as we go on. But for now, I invite one of our comrades, Victoria Wilson, a comrade from the Women Collective of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, to give us a poem. Comrade Victoria Wilson. Comrade Victoria Wilson.
Oh, our peaceful mother, who was birthed out of grace. She used to be glorious, but by the fetus of her own womb, she was put out to grass, ripped off her loincloth, and deserted at the mercy of blood-sucking paupers. It took the efforts of a great redeemer to stand on your feet, but with the ambitions of hungry-looking highness, you were knocked off, rendering you paralyzed and helpless. A once resilient mother has been reduced to a vagrant, extending the begging bowls too many times for the comforts of her children. From honor to humiliation, badged with a crown of shame, massacred by commercial catastrophe. Indeed, this is the manifestation of greed, of selfishness, and obsession. Amandla!
My next duty is to introduce Comrade Dr. Libo. But before I do that, I'd like to recognize our very old comrade and friend, Comrade Adote Bing, who has been in the trenches as one of the fighters for Pan-Africanism and the liberation of our people, Comrade Adote Bing. I also recognize Dr. Obobi, who is one of the Legion surgeons in Ghana and who used to work at the Ridge Hospital, Dr. Obobi. Then, of course, there is the acting ambassador of the Saudi Arab Democratic Republic, who is also here with us. And then there's Hajia Hamdatu Ibrahim, a leading member of the Convention People's Party. She's also here with us. We have with us also His Excellency, the Ambassador of Algeria. His Excellency, the Ambassador of Algeria is here with us. And we have representatives from the Embassy of China, the People's Republic of China, the Embassy of the People's Republic of China. I'm not so sure whether this should be done, because there's one amongst us who is a diplomat, who is an ambassador designate, but who has not presented his letters of credentials yet. And he's none other than the new Cuban ambassador to Ghana. We'd like to recognize him. Protocol is for the officials. Protocol is not for us. And that is why we have taken the liberty to introduce him. Then there's a chief amongst us. Chief. Whoa, chief. Swedro chief. Nana Odro Kwati, who was in the trenches with us in the early 70s and still is in the trenches with us. My pleasure now to introduce Dr. Libo. Dr. Libo is an academic. He is also a researcher, and he is a media practitioner. Indeed, he is the chief executive of the Guanchan Syndicate, which runs many media outlets and is dedicated to telling the true story of the world in opposition to the falsehood which is published in the Western media. He is also a fellow of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. And I'm sure that everybody here knows about Tricontinental Institute and the kind of work that it does. Dr. Libo is a comrade by all standards, and we have dealt with him over the last couple of years, and his intellectual capacity is not beyond doubt, and his commitment, the reshaping of the world using the tools of Marxism, is also not in doubt at all. We invited Dr. Libo here today because of his personal strengths and also because of our links with the institutions that he works with. It is my very distinguished pleasure to introduce Dr. Libo, but just before then, just to indicate that Dr. Libo came with 2 associates for this very occasion. And one of them, our friend and comrade Jeff, is also a fellow of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. And if he just gave us a wave, that would be sufficient. And then there is Comrade Shigu, who is also an assistant to Dr. Libo. And it is my very distinguished pleasure to invite Dr. Libo to the microphone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. Since Kwesi already introduced me as the fellow of the Tricontinental Research Institute, so you know I'm the member of the family here, yeah? So, but still, this is the first time I'm standing on the Africa soil in this podium and speaking in the open arena, yeah? Because I have to admit, in China, I will speak normally in the conference or in the meeting room, yeah? But I remember when Mao Zedong developed his theory in Yan'an, and he go to this Kangda, the schools train the Red Army's comrades. He also need to stand in the open space and without the microphone. So now the condition is much better for me today. Yeah? So I will try to make this exercise a successful one. Thank you. Dear Excellency, dear guests, dear friends, and dear comrades, it's an honor for me to here at this special day. I would like to thank Secretary General of SMG, my friend, Mr. Kwesi Pratt, for inviting me to come. And entering into this courtyard yesterday, I immediately feel this is also my home. Yeah? We belong to here. Allow me, before I go into my prepared lecture, but allow me go a little back into the history. When I took the invite and began the preparation, I discovered during the whole period of the 1950s, 1960s, under Chairman Mao's leadership, the newly born PRC, which was also weak, yeah, but provided multiple support for Africa independence movement, spanning from the diplomatic to economic and to military dimensions, which we today only can imagine and admire. China voiced its support to the Africa continent independence during diplomatic forums and international conferences. In 1963, during Zhou Enlai's visit to 10 Africa nations, Zhou Enlai also stopped by in Ghana, and he met also Dr. Nkrumah. And here, Zhou Enlai declared the China's 8 principles of the foreign aid, which emphasize non-interference in the internal affairs. These are the core principles that remain foundational even today for example, China Belt and Road Initiative and China's foreign aid. Despite its own economic hardship back then, China offered material and financial assistance to African nations to consolidate their independence and forced development. For instance, in 1962, China dispatched agriculture in Mali. And then we know the Tazara Railway project began in 1967. China provided nearly 1 billion yuan in the interest-free loans and the technical support for this giant construction effort. Finally, China directly aided African nations in their wars for independence by supplying weapons and military equipment, supporting struggles such as Algeria's fight for liberation. Today, we have to see this moral, material, and military assistance of China helping African nations lay the groundwork for the enduring friendship between China and the Africa continent. Viva Mao! On the very day of the CIA-backed coup unfolded, Dr. Nkrumah had just landed in Beijing. And I learned in this welcome party, our Prime Minister Zhou Enlai didn't tell him directly about what happened in Ghana. But then the Chinese ambassador in Ghana was returned to Beijing, then broke the news to him. This day of the shame presented a turning point that derailed Ghana's socialist path of independence. Yesterday, Comrade Kwesi gave me the book, The Great Deception, which reveals the US government's final decision to eliminate Dr. Nkrumah stemmed from their fear. USA was afraid about the influence, the coming influence of his seminal book titled Neo-Colonialism, the Last Stage of the Imperialism. Actually, I found one Chinese edition, printed in 1960 of this book. It was on my father's bookshelf. And I took the picture, and I've showed the photo to Kwesi yesterday. Now I come to my today's topics. You need to have patience with me on that has three parts. Firstly, I'm going to explain China's socialist construction's lessons. Specifically, how have Chinese comrades maintained China's socialist course during the last 4 decades of so-called opening and reform period, which somebody say this China economic development is some success of the free market forces or the success of narrow liberal doctrine, which is wrong. I'm going to prove which is wrong. Over the past 5 years, as a member of the Tricontinental Institute, I have a duty to deliver lectures to comrades from all the global south countries in Shanghai. This was the key questions people asked me. So I want to give you an answer within the 30 minutes to explain why China still is a socialist country. Then I'm going to talk about the multipolar world and the role China is going to play in this new setting. And in the last part, I'm going to share my thoughts on how would we inherit the spirit of the President, Dr. Nkrumah, and how can we follow his guidance in a creative way. Also, I'm going to talk the version 2 of the Belt and Road. How should it help Africa embark on the new path of development? Let me begin with the part 1. My key statement is, the achievements of China's socialism today are the result of the applying Comrade Mao Zedong's thought in the new era under new conditions. Let me address following 4 questions for you to validate my statement. Number 1 question. What China's successful story is telling about the relationship between socialism system and so-called market forces? Because we know by textbook, socialism has the condition and the socialism is run in a planned economy. But we saw some trouble, the collapse of the Soviet Union, living in a planned economy. Yeah? So China tried to find their own path. And this own path is not started with Deng Xiaoping in the 1978, 1979. No, it started much earlier. Why? After completing China's first 5-year plan and established the socialist transformation in China, this was 1957, Mao Zedong started thinking how China developed a different path than the Soviet Union model, because in Soviet Union, all the economic units are organized in a so-called 100% total public ownership. In China, we have a total state public ownership, but also collective ownership. And back to them, even we have some small part of the individual private units operating for society. So Mao proposed that socialism may require a stage of the commodity production. In the Kapital of the Marx, it's called in German Warenproduktion. The English term commodity production actually didn't give the real term of the Warenproduktion. Okay, we use this. And Mao said, we need to respect the exchange laws of these commodities, the Waren, produced by the state-owned units, by the collective-owned units. And you have a different stage, different region, they have a different kind of collectives. They need to exchange their output, right? So we have to avoid a commandant-style egalitarianism, which did happen for a short while of 3 years during the People's Commune movement, later 1950s. In the 1958, when Mao handled this issue of the People's Commune movement, and when he and his fellow men studied the debates of the Soviet Union's theory of a political economy, Comrade Mao dropped a very important line. I quote, "Commodity production should be viewed based on the economic fundamental system it is associated with. If it is linked to capitalist system, it will be a capitalist commodity production. If it is linked to a socialist system, then it is a socialist commodity production." 1958. Then 30 years later, 1919, around 1919, Comrade Deng Xiaoping developed Mao's idea by saying following: both socialism and capitalism can utilize the tools of planning and the markets. Important is who control the superstructure, who run the statecraft politically. And Deng Xiaoping said, we have the CPC, we have our army, we run the statecraft, so we don't afraid about introduction of so-called market tool. But cautious. Market tool is not neutral. Introducing market tool, you allow the market forces to play. This also means you will have a lot of negative consequences you face. And that negative consequences is too mild, actually, expression. Yeah, too mild. Yeah, my English is not good enough. So but it's harmful results, we say. These need to be corrected by statecraft and state interventions. So China's recent economic miracle over the past 40 years was built, firstly, under the planned economic foundation during Mao Zedong's period. Secondly, it relied heavily on the national macro plan, 5 years plans. And this year is our last year of the 15th 5 years plan, which we started in 1952, but got somehow stopped during the Cultural Revolution period and then resumed after that. My friend, Professor Meng Jie from the Fudan University, who is also a friend to Global South and to Tricontinental Institute, called it, we in China have a constructed market guided by the state, guided by the planning. Thirdly, the economic miracle benefits from the socialist systematic setting, where the public ownership remains dominant in the key sectors in the economy. So the backbone of Chinese economy in the key sector are still more than 100 central level big SOEs, state-owned enterprises. Each such giant employs often 500,000 staff in the country. The biggest one is China Railway Corporation, which actually employed 2 million staff. Key sectors such as mining, steel, telecommunication, energy, transportation, banking, and urban public services are led by those 100 central level SOEs and 10,000 local SOEs. Yeah. And the World Bank, I remember, around 2010, the World Bank, they are eager to public research results in China and saying the SOE need to be dismantled, need to be divided, need to be broken, and to get a more market efficiency. But without SOE, actually the market will not function in China. Yeah. And the state in China controls land, mineral, banks, capital markets, and the currency autonomy. And the state manages the education resources, determine legislation, and holds the levels of the taxation which can be used for redistribution purpose. So I draw two key conclusions. Number one, without this socialist setting of the public ownership and the national planning goals, the private entrepreneurs could not grow and cannot prosper in China. Put it in a more positive, in academic term, because the state policy and the SOEs create a lot of so-called positive external effects, the positive externalities in the economic term. Yeah? The private sector and the private businessman, they have extensively leveraged, shameless leveraged these positive externalities to grow at a free cost. They don't pay for these positive externalities. So each year, China education system produced 2-3 million of highly quality engineering scientific graduates. Companies like Huawei, you know Huawei, Alibaba, they hired 100,000 students from the university for sophisticated tasks, but the state actually provided the condition that they can hire. And the conclusion two, the efficiency of China's socialist mixed economy is going to surpass the monopolistic market economy in the West in general. This is why the so-called China Sputnik moment has arrived. I go to this China Sputnik moment later. So the comrades will ask the second question. Why are the billionaires allowed to live into a socialist system? It's a very provocative question. But no worry. Comrade Mao Zedong had also foresight in this point. In one of his important writings of Mao on the coalition government in China, before the real establishment of the PRC, before 1949, Mao explained the necessity of transforming national bourgeois class and integrate them into the body of the people. If you saw China's 5-star flag, the biggest star represents the CPC. And then we have the 4 stars, small stars, representing each social class or social strata. One, this star representing actually the national bourgeois. This valid is until today. During the 1950s, when the social transformation began, Mao personally involved to educate the leading national patriot capitalists to convince them to accept the socialist reform and to make use of their special management skill. Mao stated, national bourgeois carry a dual nature, double face. They can become a comparator capitalists, they surrender to imperialism, or they can be patriots who resist imperialism and contribute to socialist projects at a different stage. Why I say different stage? Because sometimes they change their face. They stay for this stage, but they then went down in the next stage. Yeah? So you need to be careful with this national bourgeois class. But Mao admits they have the potential to become a part of the people. In the recent 3 and 4 years, we witnessed in China this dual nature again. After the COVID-19 pandemic, China faced the overlapping challenges in the economy. Like in the real estate sector, we have crisis, and we have this linked to the local government debt, and lead to the young's unemployment rates high. So, seizing this opportunity, U.S. aid in Washington, which today is almost dead, I heard, yeah? But I learned in Ghana, U.S. aid has a big operation base, over 1,000 staff. The U.S. aid orchestrated the Western media and Chinese social media bloggers, some social bloggers, to smear China's economic prospects. They use the concept called the China peak. That means China already absorbed all the potential to grow. So that China is on the peak. But then from that point on, China is only moving down. So China will never catch up with the US GDP and the economic strength. They use the trick to measure China's GDP only in the US dollar term. Because the RMB got devaluated in the past 4 years. So the nominal volume size of GDP got smaller in the dollar. But in RMB, we grow every year 3, 4 to 5%. America is only 2%. They not use the purchasing power concept. Yeah? This campaign didn't work. So some investors and comparators to relocate their money and the headquarters of company to city-state Singapore, where any Chinese tourist can enter without a visa. So easy for them to stay there to observe what's happening in China. It is one phase we saw. However, we also saw another encouraging trend. Since 2017, when the United States launched the large-scale trade war and technology war against China, it shows this trade war, technology war, worked as the best political lessons for China's national entrepreneurs. I prefer to use this term to replace the national bourgeois. Hundreds of the Chinese companies' names, ranging from the semiconductor design and software developers to garment producers, appeared on the US long sanction list. Experience those crude sanction practice firsthand and first time. Chinese national entrepreneurs have become more patriotic in their heart. They're realizing that the Westerners, the ultimate goal is to prevent China from developing high-value industries. So the goals are to enslave China, like they kept doing it to the African nations in the past decades, or in the 200, 300 years of the Africa history. China's national entrepreneurs now more determined to support the leadership of the CPC and committed to China's socialist model of the modernization. This new social strata of the national entrepreneurs received education program from the CPC about how to learn from the mass and the society, how to work for the people, and what are the roadmap of China's socialist project. The CPC's United Front Work Department, 统战部, and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference regularly organize those programs. The best example I want to cite here of the national entrepreneur is Huawei's CEO, Mr. Ren Zhengfei, who actually visited the US, admired a lot of achievements in the US before the trade war. His company provided 4G network for Africa, Latin America, and Europe to enable the broadband connectivity. And then his company invented 5G technology, want to do a big business in the world, but got banned by the US. The US banned Huawei from Europe, from Latin America, from Ghana. So in 2017, Huawei come to the list of the sanction and being forced to withdraw their business from the smartphone business for 3-4 years. Even his daughter of the Mr. Ren got detained for 2 years in the custody by the Canadian police forces following a US court order. But the Ren stayed on board, supported by state, supported by the government, and led Huawei's anti-team to challenge the 7-nanometer chips production for high-end phone and equipment. And his team invented the Harmony Operation System, we call in China Hongmeng system, the open source operating system that breaks Google's Android monopoly position in the world. China started now investigation against Google's monopoly position 2 months ago. It's worthy here to mention that Huawei as a company practiced a universal profit-sharing scheme. Cannot call this a social scheme, but is a consequent profit-sharing scheme which all engineers of Huawei could participate. And they got 300,000 engineers worldwide. Ren Zhengfei, as founder of the Huawei himself, holds less than 2% of the company's profit share. This is the model for all China national entrepreneurs to follow. So Huawei is the #1 model for China private sector today in China. And all the scholars for the Marxist study and for the socialist studies, we all agree Huawei should receive this honor. And the Commander Xi Jinping hold a seminar, workshop with the national entrepreneurs just 2 weeks ago. And in the front, in the middle, sitting Ren Zhengfei, in opposite to Xi Jinping. Because I worked in the Guancha media, we report a lot of the innovative stories by the youth born in the 1990s. And we discovered they have no problem to talk concepts like planned economy in the digital age, or capping the private capital returns, just to limit their return. Fix them in a certain range to provide a bigger share for the working class, for the laborers, and for the supply chains. So we believe we're going to see in China more open adoption of the socialist idea by the new generation of the national entrepreneurs. Many of them are billionaires. Question 3, how China managed to mitigate the harmful efforts the market created. How many time I have, Chrissy? you said I have plenty of time, yeah? So, should I go on? Okay, number 3 question. It's a good question. As a matter of fact, a marked economy lacking social oversight is automatically creating extreme imbalances. Yeah, extreme imbalances. That's much better than the negative consequences, yeah, I used. Such as environmental degradation, widening wealth gaps, intensified urban-rural income disparities, and the destruction of the rural life in the end. We have to acknowledge that before 2008, during the China rapid wave of the marketization period, Chinese government experiences with state regulation was very limited, very insufficient. So such harmful imbalances did emerge to varying degrees in different regions. Some region better, some region disaster, yeah, causing wide social concerns. In response to those deep concerns, in 2006, the CPC leadership proposed a construction of the new countryside and declared the vision of the ecological green development. In August 2005, during his tenure as the party secretary of Zhejiang province, Comrade Xi Jinping visited a small county called Anji, and there he formulated a so-called two-mountain theory for green development. So the original wording in the China documentary said so. Clear waters and the green mountains are as valuable as gold and the silver mountains. Gold and silver mountains, this is reflecting the two mountains. So this two mountain theory concept then spread out over whole China when she became the leader of the CPC and changed the landscape of whole China in the past 13 years. I'm the witness of this. When the Comrade Xi Jinping became the General Secretary in 2012, the first priority of him was combating the corruption to purify the political environment. The second priority was promoting green development to improve air and water quality. Report said that the improvement in the air quality in Beijing, where I live in, over 7 years' time was equivalent to the progress the United States achieved over 30 years after its Clean Air Act passed. 30 years for Los Angeles, big district. So again, a case for the socialism surpasses capitalism. And the third priority of Xi was eradicating the absolute poverty, which you already know, so I will not report too much on that. So over the past 20 years, China's renewable energy sector and the National Ecological Restoration Project have led the world. China's socialist approach simultaneously resolved not only environmental harms, but also developed the green technologies, create own IPs, and achieve the carbon peak target ahead of the schedule. And at the end of the 2020, China achieved a phased victory in the poverty alleviation. Immediately in 2021, the government launched the Rural Revitalization Plan. So over the past decades, state allocated more than $1 trillion funds towards rural areas development and improved roads, telecommunication massively. So not only the rural residents' income growth has significantly outpaced those of the urban residents. Also, the young people, graduates, now they start to choose to leave the city, give up their city jobs, and then return to their hometowns to start the organic farming business or join the new cooperative entities and re-alive the village life, the village society, which is important for each civilization. And the last question of your comrade would be how the concept of the struggles got kept and got transformed at the China current stage of the socialism. So we didn't mention much the class struggle. If you study the China so political education books, or you read the communique, the political report from the CPC's congresses. And the phrase, we must be prepared to carry out great struggles with many new historical characteristics. This sentence was firstly incorporated into the political report of the 80th National Congress of the CPC in 2012. We were surprised to saw this sentence because we didn't, our year, for many years, not suit to listen, struggle, right? But now we know. In the preparation of the speech, I found the history. This sentence come into the political report only because of the Comrade Xi Jinping's insistence in 2012. So over the past 30 years, he has repeatedly emphasized the necessity of engaging in different great struggles. In my personal belief, great struggle concept is more appropriate and dialectical for China's today's stage. On the one hand, it is broader and more flexible than the term only class struggle. On the other hand, it can be much specific, targeted. For example, referring to specific struggles against the Western hegemonyism or against the liberal ideology, against the corruption in the state, in the party, and against the bureaucracy in the state. So we should keep lessons learned. Our great master, Lenin, told us that the vast ocean of the market forces constantly generate petty bourgeois, 小资产阶级, petty bourgeois consciousness. And we make joke when we live in Beijing, Shanghai, and go to the campus in the Fudan University. Sometimes I say, Professor Meng Jie, now we are in the kind of the mind of the petty bourgeois. Because you have the moment you catch, you say you are not a Marxist in that moment. Yeah? You live in the ocean, you cannot completely decouple from the influence. Yeah? And I have to admit, so before 2006, I was a fan of the Western movie, TV series. Yeah? But when I convert and become a firm Marxist, and I have to admit to my daughter, I can't not enjoy any movie made in the Western industry. But my aesthetic taste degraded. Yeah. So this part is okay. But when we go to some exhibition, when we see some good shows, and then we know this is not Marxist. Yeah. This is the petty bourgeois. Where we are. Later, Mao Zedong told us that the collusion between the state power and the capitalist would create a new bourgeois class in China. This is why he launched the Cultural Revolution. Xi Jinping now teaches us that if the corruption cannot effectively battled, curbed, controlled, then there will be a risk both party and the state would collapse. So our socialist project will collapse as well. So the reality of the Western hegemony manipulate color revolutions over the past 30 years against the CPC, demonstrate the true existence of the fifth column. The fifth column exists, and they are beside us. And the hybrid information warfare against the CPC, often carried out by the members of our own universities, our own party media professionals, and by our own and imported NGOs. You know this well, better than me. Think of the Cultural Revolution, in quotation, yeah, happening now in Washington, in the US. We firstly know that more than 1,200 influential key opinion leaders, intellectuals in China, actually on the US aid payment list for a very long time. Therefore, ideological struggle is essentially, in my eyes, a manifestation of the class struggle under new circumstances. There are market-oriented reforms that align with the socialist course, but there also could be linked towards capitalist destiny. So we cannot forget this ideological struggle happen every day. However, today's form of carrying class struggle in China differs from the CPC's early phases of the science power, of the phase of consolidating the power after the revolution. Physical and brutal methods are no longer necessary. Indeed, the struggle has transformed into a long-term and hybrid form and has multiple forms to manifest, such as manifesting culture warfare by creating a movie. We just had a very successful animation movie called Naja 2. Actually, the subtext is against the US hegemony and loved by the whole country. This has a historical hit on the box revenue. Or like we, media, engage every day in Guancha for this media fake news battle. Or in China, in many state-owned, collective, private companies, you will have the collective learning or self-education session of the party sales members every week. Also, the front line of the struggle often shifts. We run into the situations recently where the formal comrades in arms may become the opponents on other issues, or when the phase changed. So somebody is on our bus, but then they went out. They say bye to the bus. Then we become enemy, right? So the struggle, the class struggle, is become very sophisticated. But interesting, when we look at the history of the CPC, during the China's Revolutionary War and during the early period of the socialist construction, there's a lot of plenty historical cases. Comrade Mao, dialectical approach, such as distinguishing between the primary and the secondary contradictions, identify the real threats to us, building a united front to isolate the reactionaries, and to correctly handling contradictions among people, our own people. Those instructions, those cases remain the most sophisticated guide for identifying enemies and clarifying the direction of struggle at a specific stage. Actually, this reminded me, promised VJ to have a project to do the selected Mao Zedong's reading. So we selected some articles which actually Mao wrote in the wartime and in the early construction period, but this theory and these cases Mao used exactly can apply to our current situation. To conclude part one, proactive statecraft and the strong CPC leadership are the preconditions to allow market forces functioning in an effective way and to make contribution to socialist cause. China's 40 years experiment shows this approach can work. It was never a success of so-called neoliberalism. It is not a state capitalism's approach either, my friend, my comrades. It is a people-centered approach. It is a socialist approach. Viva socialism! Viva CPC! Viva SMG! Now I have done half of my speech. I'm sorry, should I continue? So, I have people's mandate. I can continue, but I keep, this was a very difficult one, yeah? These 4 questions, and, but now become more easier, so I will go quick, okay? The part 2 is about the new multipolar world and the China's relationship with the global south. All we witnessed, we are really entering in this multipolar world now, week by week. Yeah? The events happened. The events developed so fast. To be candid, before 2022, China's approach to a new global order was much different from Russia's. Because Russia's, there was revolutionary. They fight the first shot against the Western-led liberal international order. China pursued in China style. In the Taiji, we have the Taiji yin-yang style. So we pursued a double strategy. One is, on the one hand, we advocate to the reforms within the existing international framework like UN, like WTO, and try implement authentic multilateralism, but which cannot lead to much success. Yeah. On the other hand, since 2012, since Xi became our president, China has strengthened strategic ties with Russia, expanded investment into military capabilities a lot to counter against the US provocation in the South China Sea under so-called cover freedom of navigation. After the Russian-Ukraine military conflict erupted, China firmly denied sanctions against Russia. China's position is neutral. Yeah? China is accused of the aggression, but China say we will not be part of the sanction against Russia. So the majority of a global South country also stand with China. However, the Biden administration, the EU, and especially NATO displayed blatant hostility toward China with growing cause for so-called fighting 2 wars together. Means defeating Russia first, then pushing NATO into the Asia Pacific to turn Taiwan into a second Ukraine. Given this severe situation, China's support for the multipolar world finally become resolute and explicit. How to advance a multipolar world? How to really strengthen the position of the global south as a whole? New platforms must be established. I personally believe that one of the key platforms is the BRICS mechanism. In 2023, the second year after Russia-Ukraine conflict, the BRICS summit in South Africa firstly declared the expansion of their memberships to 10 countries. This is the first time for the expansion. By the end of the 2023, the GDP of the Western G7 accounted for about 29% of the global total, while the BRICS 10 countries accounted for about 36%. And the yearly new contribution to GDP largely due to the BRICS and to the global south. Moreover, BRICS countries together have the promising potential in 3 major areas which can and will empower the advancement of the global south countries. Number 1, its potential in agricultural production and in the mineral resources. Number 2, potential in the energy supply, both regarding traditional and renewable energy. And number 3, potential in production of the engineering and the science talent and the strengths in the information technology. China and India each train millions of the engineering and the science students every year, while Russia has a world-class education system in the mathematics and in aerospace. But still, we need to have to figure out new ways how to leverage this huge, this rich potentials BRICS countries now possess, and how we leverage this and offer to the global south to develop. As a side note, the West is also part of the new multipolar world. In the February interview, the new US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, admit the Trump administration accepts the multipolar worldview, and there are many powers aside the United States. It's the first time the US admit they cannot control the world as a whole. Now one would ask, what role will China play in this multipolar world? What is China's relationship with the countries of the global south? China considers itself always as a member of a developing countries' world. And more than 2 years ago, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi first time declared China will always belong to the global south camp. This is the first time China officially acknowledged the term global south. And myself and our fellow in Guancha Syndicate, and also our fellow in the Tricontinental Research Institute, we are proud because we propagated this notion of global south starting 4 years ago already. Yeah, so we were only one in China in media in the think tank. We say China's future is lying in the global south, aligned with global south. We're living in the awakening period. Yeah. So the socialism flag need to go from China to the global south. 2 reasons So China's today's stance aligns with Chairman Mao's legacy. Mao provided 2 sentences, crucial sentences. Number 1, China must make a great contribution to humanity. 中国应该对人类有更大贡献。Number 2, China will never seek hegemony position, even after becoming stronger. This is actually the sentence Deng Xiaoping delivered in the 1972 in the UN General Assembly. But the speech was corrected by Mao. And this sentence would put Mao himself into the speech as the manifest. And why China will not become the hegemony power in this new era? 2 reasons I can offer here. First, history. China's rise is a return to its historical normal position. About 1850, so it's 170 years ago, China's GDP accounted for approximately 30% of the world's total GDP. This was the time when the Opium War started in China, launched by the Britain and the French, roughly proportional to its population share in the world. In 2023, the global average GDP per capita was about $13, yeah? And China's per capita GDP that year reached 12,000 US dollar. But if we use the PPP calculation, this will double, right? So if history is the best teacher, and I can assure you that China's anti-political philosophy and the statecraft wisdom are around the deep respect for history, then China's foreign policy will be based on the principle of so-called Wang Dao. Dao, like Dao De King, the Dao, the way. What is the Wang Dao? Wang Dao is the opposite to the hegemonic bullying. 霸道. The other is 霸道. 王道 means this way to govern, to benefit the world with the moral high ground, and to treat each country equally, regardless big or small. So this concept of 王道 for global governance can balance the morality and interest, promotes shared development, and encourage inclusiveness. So the second reason I want to offer today is the world economic globalization started to change their shape. In the past 6 years, the global supply chain underwent dramatic restructuring. US and the EU prefer to adopt so-called nearshore, friendshore strategy, try to cut off their dependency on China's manufacturing. We now witness a rise of the parallel globalizations. There are 3 globalizations occurred in parallel. The first sphere of the globalization involves around China's own key supply chains, with emphasis on the strengthening their future cooperation with global south. The second sphere is interesting. We call it high fence, small yard. It's actually the northern countries, the global north. They want to have the insular globalization better to protect their national security, their border protection, and to protect their technology advantage, the monopoly positions, actually. But China is move on. Every month, we crack their monopoly positions in different industries. The third sphere, which is important for Africa and for global south, the third sphere of the parallel globalization fosters deeper regional supply chain reconfiguration. So this provides a chance for like forging Africa trade economic zones to offer a path to reindustrialize and the capital accumulation. Today, even in China, we have the regional reconfiguration needs because 50% of China's population, more than 600 million people with low income, still live in the small towns and the county rural areas. Actually, the other part of the economy, they are more close linked to the first 2 circle of globalization, where we need also the third globalization happening inside of China. But China is big, so we need to absorb this reconfiguration of trade, of supply chain inside China, which is happened, which we call the 县域经济. There will be no need for just 1 or 2 or 3 dominant economic powerhouse to serve all these 3 spheres. Yeah? So one dominant power is over. The idea is bad idea, is dead idea. Yeah? Only mutually beneficial approach is needed in this new era. And here, to conclude, before to conclude the second part, I will give more confidence to our comrades. China now has the strength to promote this governance in Wang Dao, because the China Sputnik movement has arrived on the multiple levels. In the manufacturing, China's manufacturing value added already account for more than 30% for the world share. In the current US dollar, if you do the PPP, China is easily surpassed 50% in the manufacturing of the world. And sometimes I tell my national entrepreneurs, say, hey, stop to sell the products to the other world. Yeah, you got trouble because you captured too high market share already. Yeah, and better to move your supply chain, your production to the countries, and then together with the people to reindustrialize. In the high-tech fields, China has independent research production system in the 5G, 6G computing operating system we mentioned, ship design and ship manufacturing, aerospace, quantum computing, and the nuclear fusion. all China are leading. You name it, the list goes on and on. And also in area of the so-called important battlefield, AI, the artificial intelligence. 2 months ago, DeepSeek is a China new startup, has democratized the so-called large language model technology in the world. It's not only wiped out the $1 trillion US from the Nevada stock bubble in the US, but also create new possibilities for AI sovereignty in the global south. My comrade Jeff Xiong is today here, and his team is working on this AI sovereignty, digital sovereignty issue in China and in Tricontinental Institute. The Sputnik moment arrived also in the military weapon system as well. China is now not only on the equal footing with the United States in the military system upgrading, in areas such as sixth-generation fighter jets, hypersonic missiles, and the Navy warship new design, China has surpassed the United States already. Yeah? So with this strength, China can calmly respond to the various provocations and game plans of the current US government under Trump. So, viva international solidarity. Now, good news. I come to the part 3. After gaining independence, many African countries initially pursued socialist planned economy, we all know. Dr. Nkrumah was one of the most respected pioneers in this path. He promoted Ghana's industrialization, agriculture modernization, and established free education and healthcare systems, which we admire. Although the challenges with the shortage of the funding and the mismanagement of the SOEs prevented the full realization, the benefits of the projects. But still, Nkrumah's projects in the infrastructure and in social services remain the important legacy for Ghana society. The global resurgence of the neoliberalism and the privatization wave happening during the 1980s and 1990s, coupled with the Western interferences, Africa's development path has sadly struggled to break free from the shackles of the colonial dependency. The share of the manufacturing in Africa GDP even declined from the 15% in the 1980 to 10% in the 2020. Education and healthcare disparities rises with rising inequality. Environmental costs also rise heavily. If GDP growth does not translate into food on the people's table, it is merely a number game for the elite. We look at South Africa, so-called the most developed nation in Africa, the continent. It now has the highest Gini coefficient, the highest inequality globally. The coefficient figure is at 0.63. So in short, the neoliberal economic model of the past 30 years has failed to deliver to the African people. It's time to rethink. Through the initial discussion with Africa scholars, we found some common ground. Africa's future development model must draw lessons from both planned economy and market economies, incorporate the resilience of local cultures, strengthen statecraft capacity, and pave the way for sovereign, self-reliant growth. If we go deeper, any new Africa development model should meet 3 fundamental requirements. The first requirement, balancing the role of the state and the market. We should uphold Dr. Nkrumah's principle of the economic sovereignty and explore a mixed economic model. On the one hand, public-private partnership to drive the infrastructure projects with foreign companies required to partner with local entrepreneurs. On the other hand, key industries, strategic industries such as mining, telecommunication, public service, water supply, must remain under national control. Second, promoting regional integratism. Nkrumah's call for the Pan-Africanism and a unified African political community was visionary, and it still serves as guidance for today's struggle, for today's action. Allow me to quote from his speech at the first summit of the Organization of the Africa Unit in 1963. So the speech was held in Ethiopia. He said, unless we can establish a vast industrial complex in Africa, possible only through the African unity, our farmers will remain at the mercy of the foreign commodity markets unless we ensure that farmers receive fair prices, access to the mature markets. What use are the education and industrialization to them? What good is the development capital if they cannot achieve fair returns and a high standard of living? Unless we establish a vast industrial complex in Africa, what do urban workers and farmers crowded onto the overworked land gain from the political independence? If they still face unemployment or toil in unskilled jobs, what will enable them to enjoy the benefits of the education, technical training, energy, and ambitions that independence should provide? So no one can explain this issue better than himself. Yeah. The third rule, restoring socialist values of the social equity and the public welfare, especially developing the rural areas and reducing the urban-rural disparities, are essential for the upholding socialist values, preserving the roots of civilization. If we took the Chinese lesson, the solution are not urbanization, move people into big cities, or marketization, let the capital go into the countryside. It should only be socialist transformation with collective efforts and supported by public-owned infrastructure. Because the market and the capital that doesn't leave the poor people living in the countryside at all. So, building on these China experiences and Nkrumah's call for restoring collective ownership within the traditional Africa village communities, grounded in the principles of the humanitarianism and the egalitarianism, was both visionary and justified. Time will prove the wisdom of his ideas. At the last year, the China-Africa forums, Comrade Xi Jinping emphasized the shared aspiration to achieve modernization for 2.8 billion people. He means 1.4 billion Chinese plus 1.4 billion Africans. Comrade Xi has a really big heart and a grand vision. But how can we realize this vision? Yeah. I see the answer only lies in the version 2 of the Belt and Road Initiative. I call this BRA 2.0. If the BRA 1.0, the first vision, passed in the past 13 years, only focus on the hard infrastructure to provide the physical foundation for developing projects. But then the BRI 2.0 must address the soft part of the human and the technology foundation of the development, which Nkrumah already mentioned. Investment projects should aim at providing educational network, technology co-development network, local supply chain network. But what this would look like? For example, China and Brazil have jointly established an Agriculture, Science and Education Development Center in Beijing. My Brazilian comrades from the MST and from the Tricontinental Institute with the research fellow at the Beijing CAU University are conducting world-class innovation jobs in the field of the organic fertilizers. And we are looking ways to bring this methodology, new results to Africa continent for education, and then to build a local supply chain, to co-develop the local application to meet the development needs locally with local talent, with local spirit. Another example, as a BRICS country, India's software skills, China's 5G, 6G, and AI platforms, Russia's cybersecurity technologies, and Brazil's big data application in agriculture and healthcare are all of state of art in industry and mutually complementary. But how about to launch a group of projects to set up the ICT development hub in the selected African countries to enable local education upgraded and innovation speeded? Such innovation and education hub can have the form of the so-called BRICS University Network, which our think tank first caught last November in China, which we, with our friends in Brazil, and MST, and Tricontinental, will propose at this year's BRICS People's Council in Brazil to make the BRICS University Network a reality and to help. So to rule out this BRA 2.0 point, leading Chinese state enterprise should set a positive example, while the local chamber of the commerce and industrial association in China should guide Chinese private entrepreneurs towards responsible and ethical behavior in Africa continent. Dear comrades, I'm conclude. China has shown the obvious superiority of the socialist development project over the narrow liberal capitalism, and has also shown that Dr. Nkrumah's thoughts were insightful and valid. It is our task now to carry on the lessons learned, to apply them into the local conditions in Africa, and to learn innovation practices from the mass, as Mao said on the wall. And Mao always reminded us innovations regarding scientific reorganization of production and of distribution. Viva socialism! Viva SMG! Thank you. And I done my time, I done my job, and I feel happy and I feel aligned with the atmosphere today. Quest, I'm sorry I took too long.
There's no need whatsoever for Comrade Dr. Li Bo to be sorry for giving us such an insight into Africa-China relations, especially relations that were developed in the time of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and Chairman Mao, and how these relations have been extremely beneficial to the world. I'd like to recognize the High Commissioner of South Africa who has joined us. I also like to recognize a very, very special person, Mr. Paul Afoko, former national chairman of the New Patriotic Party. Mr. Paul Afoko is here with us. And at this stage, we would like to crown the presentation by Dr. Libo with a performance by the Freedom Band. And the Freedom Band is going to give us a rendition of the Internationale. May we be upstanding to sing the Internationale, led by the Freedom Band.
Yes, now if you know. Oh, yeah. International we go. Woo! Arise, ye workers from your slumbers. Arise, ye prisoners of want. For reason revolt now thunders, and arise, arise, arise. Henceforth we change the old traditions and spend the dust to win the prize. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face the Internationale unites the human race. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face the Internationale unites the human race. No more deluded by reactions on tyrants, only we make a war. The soldiers will pitch that action. They will break ranks and fight no more. And if those cannibals will try into sacrifices to their pride, they soon shall hear the bullet fly. In which to the generals on our side. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face the Internationale unites the human race. So comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face the Internationale unites the human race. No savior from on high delivers, no faith we have in Prince of Peace. Our right hand that chains perceive, chains of hatred, greed and fear, and the peace will we the booty to give it all a happier Lord. Each hour of must do their due till we strike the iron wall. Come on, let me hear you. So comrades, come louder, and the last fight let us face the Internationale unites the human. Let me hear you once again. Woo! Rally, and the last fight let us face the Internationale unites the human race. The Internationale unites the human race. Thank you. Thank you. Oh. Thank you very much. We'll see you next year.
Comrades, please resume your seats. After Comrade Libo's performance, I don't suspect that there's too much time to speak again. I'd like to recognize also in our midst a very special gentleman, Dr. Don Atta. And Dr. Don Atta is an architect. And as a matter of fact, Dr. Don Atta is the man who designed the Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum. And we'd like to welcome him into our midst. And with him is Eric Don Atta, his son. And Eric has made a lot of strides in media. One of the best photographers I've seen in my life, photographer and videographer and all of that, and very deeply intellectual. Eric, you're welcome to our premises, and we do hope that you will not come here when it's big occasion like this, but you come and join us in doing our work. Welcome to this place. Of course, I recognize also Albie Watts and Mandela, leaders of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. They are also here with us. Now, I'm supposed to make remarks. What is there to say? Perhaps the first important thing to say is that our three comrades, including Dr. Libo, traveled for more than 12 hours all the way from China to the headquarters of the socialist movement to give this lecture. It must mean something to them. It is an indication that Nkrumah, his achievements, the conspiracy against him and so on, is not just Ghanaian, but it's international. And that it affected Ghana, it affected the world, even affected such a great country like China. And this is a very important message. Their presence alone is a very significant message. The other thing that I'd like to comment about is that, of course, when Akisoya is around and Don Atta is around, one has to be very careful when you want to speak about old age. But I'm not a very young man. And I've lived in this country for a very long time and observed things. And I've seen these Western diplomats walk around our country as if they are gods, talking down to our presidents and talking down to the ministers and telling them what to do, and warning them that if they don't do what pleases them, there will be sanctions. Indeed, before the last elections, the US ambassador actually made a statement that if Ghanaian politicians did not behave well, they will be denied visas to the United States of America. I mean, what impudence, what arrogance. Now, what makes them think that the United States of America is heaven and that if you don't go to the United States of America, we will die? Rubbish. But you see, on the other side, I have never heard a Chinese leader tell the African people what to do and how to do it. Chinese aid and assistance has never been conditioned on the system of government we choose, has never been conditioned on who leads us, has never been conditioned on whether or not we support LGBT rights or not. That is true friendship. Friendship based on respect. Friendship which recognizes that we have our own values and so on. And this year, in discussing the perspective of Nkrumah and Mao, I think it's important to recognize that both leaders insisted on the sovereignty of our states. They insisted on respect for the African people, and they insisted on non-interference by the bullies of our world. This is a significant contribution that both Nkrumah and Mao made to our struggles. I happen to have been a little sick not too long ago and had to receive treatment in Shanghai. And the hurricane struck when I was in Shanghai. And days before the hurricane struck, everybody was in panic. At least I was in panic. And I was in my hotel room when the hurricane struck. And I saw the force of the hurricane. And I saw trees uprooted. And I saw garbage thrown around and so on. 1 hour after the hurricane, I walked out of my hotel and there was no sign that a hurricane had just hit Shanghai. What level of efficiency, what level of effectiveness, and so on. China has made great strides for its people. China is our friend, and China continues to offer a lot more. Like the Belt and Road Initiative that Comrade Dr. Li Bo spoke about. Now, I like us just to look around. Look around Ghana. Don't go far. And don't look at anything. Just look at our railway system. The railway lines. The railway lines, where do they begin from? They begin from the richest areas in our country. The places where we have gold, where we have diamond, where we have manganese, where we have timber and so on. Now, where do they end? They don't end in factories. They don't end in factories which are catering for the needs of the Ghanaian people. They end in the ports to be taken away to Paris, to London, to Bonn, and so on. Now, after the defeat of colonialism, one of the tasks which should confront us is a rethinking of national infrastructure. What kind of infrastructure should we build to support our independence? What kind of infrastructure should we build so that we can control our own resources and exploit these resources for our own benefit? Infrastructure becomes a political issue. The type of infrastructure you build determines whether you take control of your national economy or you continue to be in the doldrums as we are in today. So this is where the Belt and Road Initiative becomes absolutely important. We as an African country ought to be taking advantage of the Belt and Road Initiative because there are no strings attached. They won't tell you how to run your government. They won't tell you who should be your president. In fact, China has never overthrown any government anywhere in the world. That's a fact. China has not imposed a blockade on Cuba or any other country in the world. China has never supported genocide like the West supports genocide against the Palestinian people and so on. So this facility is available for the African people, it's available for our government. And I would urge, especially the new government, headed by my friend, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, to open its eyes, to look well, and to end this stupidity of dancing with the IMF and the World Bank, which has taken us nowhere. The new administration must understand very clearly that the overwhelming support they got in the elections was a rejection of what existed then and a craving for Ghanaians for something new, something dynamic, something which is forward-looking. What did Ghanaians reject? We had come to a situation where 120%, mark it, 120% of total national revenue was needed for only three line items: debt repayment, debt servicing, and public sector emoluments. No country can survive under these circumstances. And we should be asking us, how did we get here? How did we get into such a mess? We got into this mess, one, because of the terrible advice that we received from the Western powers after they had overthrown the Nkrumah government. And you would recall, those of you who are a little older, that after the 1966 coup, the new government was advised not to expand the energy infrastructure at all. They said we had more than we needed. Don't expand energy infrastructure. And they foolishly listened to the Western masters that they had. Now listen to me very carefully. We didn't expand the energy infrastructure, fine. At the time of the coup, Soviet engineers were already on site to construct the Bui Dam project. They were stopped because some guy from the United Kingdom had come to advise them not to expand the energy infrastructure. So they stopped the Bui Dam construction. Bui Dam, the construction had begun by 1966. So you can imagine if the Bui Dam had been continued, the impact it would have been made on our total energy infrastructure. They stopped it. We had entered into an agreement with the Soviet Union to start the nuclear production of nuclear power. They stopped that too. That's how intelligent and smart these coup leaders were. Now, they didn't just stop that. Ghana had acquired a small nuclear, reactor, which had been installed at the Atomic Energy Commission. The US wanted to understand Soviet technology then. The new leaders decided to dismantle it and to give it to the United States of America. What fools they were. What fools they were. What idiots they were. Now listen, comrades, and I mean every word I'm using here. Every word I'm using here, I mean it. Now listen, comrades. Listen very carefully. These guys came shouting that the private sector is the engine of development, that the state has no role in the economy, everything should be privatized and so on. And somehow, some people listened to them. And they started the spate of privatizations. They privatized nearly 600 state enterprises. 600 state enterprises were privatized. Now, comrades, as we speak today, only two of those 600 state enterprises survived in private hands. And the two are Movenpick Ambassador Hotel and the other one near here, what is it called? Lancaster Hotel. These are the only two that survived. Everything else was destroyed. Now, there's a clear demonstration that private hands do not perform magic. And that private hands, to all intents and purposes, can be more inefficient and can perform disastrously when it comes to the pursuit of the interest of our people. We cannot also forget that we embarked on a rigorous pursuit of the neoliberal agenda in 1982. I hope you all remember 1982. By 1983, 300,000 workers had lost their jobs. I hope you remember. Don't forget, 300,000 workers had lost their job. under this craziness of pursuing the neoliberal agenda. We ought to be careful. We ought to learn the important lessons of history, especially of recent history. The energy sector, things being so good, Professor Akila Kwasoya is here with us. And I recall that he once chaired the board of the Volta River Authority. And I read a memo he had written to government then, some of the reckless moves that were being made in the energy sector. Nobody listened to him. And what we suffer today is a consequence of our leaders playing deaf when they are offered proper advice. Today, we are being told again that we have power crisis and that the way forward is to privatize the electricity company of Ghana. And I sit back and I say, what is happening? When will our leaders open their heads and begin to think? What is happening to our leaders? Privatization of ECG again, today? Why? Not too long ago, our government decided to privatize water supply. And they brought in Aqua Vita and Rands of South Africa. It was such a total disaster that government itself ran away from that agreement. This is not the first time that we are attempting to privatize the electricity company of Ghana. Not too long ago, we brought in the electricity company of France and privatized the revenue mobilization aspects of electricity company of Ghana and so on. Within 2 years, it was such a monumental disaster that we had to cancel that agreement. Why? The government who just left office, MPP, they attempted privatization. What happened? Even insurance guarantees and so on, they were completely messed up. So where is this idea of privatization again today? Where is it coming from? We will very strongly, very, very strongly urge the current government to abandon the idea of privatizing the electricity company of Ghana now. We fully appreciate that some very important things are happening. Some very interesting things are happening now, and so on. And we salute President Mahama and his government for it. But they should stay on course and abandon the reckless path which their predecessors took to their own doom. The people of Ghana are wide awake, our eyes are open, and our activism has not come to an end yet. There's still a lot of steam in us to pursue our activist goals and so on. Finally, I'd like to comment on some foreign policy issues. This is Ghana. If you take West Africa, West Africa is made up of a population of between 500 and 600 million people. Nigeria alone has a population of about 260 million people. Ghana is the second most populated country in West Africa, with a population of about 32 million. So if you look at Ghana, the way we position ourselves in international relations, the way we are giving so much respect, the fact that we are host to the Organization of African Trade Union Unity, we are host to AFTA, and so on, it is clear that we are punching beyond our real weight in Africa and the world. Now, how come that we are able to punch beyond our weight in African and international affairs? The only reason is that Ghana became the cradle of the national liberation struggle. Ghana became the center for training our national liberation leaders in Southern Africa, in Eastern Africa, in Central Africa. We gave them diplomatic support. We gave them military assistance. We gave them money. We gave them ideas. So, throughout Africa, people see Ghana as the cradle of liberation. Ghana, along with other leaders, Nkrumah along with other leaders, came up with the idea of the non-aligned movement with Suharto, with Fidel Castro, with Marshal Tito, and so on. They established the non-aligned movement. And the principle behind the non-aligned movement was very simple. That we would remain neutral in the Cold War, but jealously protect our interests as a people and our right to be who we are. Now look at Ghana today. What is happening in Ghana today? Unbelievable. Ghana today. And sometimes I hear some of my friends and they boast about the fact that, oh, we have very good relations with Israel and we have very good relations with Palestine. We are standing in the middle. And they think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that is something we should be applauding. Israel is genocidal. Israel is committing genocide. They cannot be our friends if we are to follow the foreign policy of Nkrumah. We have a duty to stand with oppressed people everywhere in the world. We have a duty, we have a commitment to see their struggles as our own struggles. Standing in the middle is not the Ghanaian position. At least it is not what Nkrumah taught us to do. We don't stand in the middle of racism and the struggle against racism. We cannot stand in the middle when apartheid is raging havoc on the people. We take side with the forces we struggle against apartheid. We cannot be in the middle, and that is very clear. Something very, very strange happened only a couple of weeks ago. And you know, everybody knows. In fact, Paul Afoko is my witness. That the outgone president, I was going to say was my friend, but I think is still my friend. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo was my very good friend. We struggled together. You know, we organized the Kumi Preku demonstrations and did many things together and so on. And a lot of people had a lot of hope in him, and that is why he won the elections to become president in the first place. But can you imagine that 2 hours before he left office as president, 2 hours, not 3, not 4, 2 hours before Akufo-Addo left office as president, he suspended diplomatic relations with the Saudi Arab Democratic Republic. What? What? How do you explain this? Are people who are fighting against colonial occupation? And what is the reason? The reason is that, oh, some talks are going to take place. And for the talks to be effective, let's suspend diplomatic relations with one side. What logic? I think Bertrand Russell has a lot of work to do in Ghana, especially amongst our leaders. But what is even more surprising, I had decided not to talk about this matter publicly, for good reason. Because I was intensely aware of efforts being made by some leaders in the National Democratic Congress and some persons in government to ensure that reason prevails and so on. And I decided to keep quiet, not to make any public pronouncements in order to jeopardize their effort or to prejudice their efforts and so on. But let me say that today is February 24th. The government was sworn in on 7th January, and nothing has been done. Surprising. I am surprised. Is this the National Democratic Congress that we knew? Or is this a new National Democratic Congress? Happily, the political advisor of the Vice President, who is our friend and who has occupied this podium before, Her Excellency Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, her political advisor is here. It's not just a political advisor, he used to be national chairman of the National Democratic Congress. I refer to the Honorable Ofosu Ampofo. Honorable, all salute to you. But please do something about this untenable situation. It doesn't speak well of the Ghanaian people. It's a shame that up to today, we have not been able to reverse this situation. And I feel sad. The other day, I went on the internet, surfed on the internet and so on, and I saw the hundreds of trade unions, of political parties, of youth organizations all over the world asking questions. Why is this so? Why is Ghana behaving like this and so on? I feel embarrassed by this situation. And I'm hoping that the matter will end here and that we will do what is right in order to show our commitment to all people fighting against colonial occupation. And I'm not just talking about Western Sahara. I'm talking about the situation in the Geisha Islands, West Papua, and many other places. We have to take a principled stand on all of these issues. Foreign policy, which is adopted, crafted to enable leaders dance their way in murky waters and so on, doesn't serve the interest of our people and doesn't really lead to a situation where we are able to assert our sovereignty and to assert our rights as citizens. Next year, we'll be observing the Day of Shame again. Indeed, 30 years ago, when we started observing the Day of Shame, it was at the peak of our struggles. And it was unthinkable to find representatives of the establishment at the observance of the Day of Shame. Today, we celebrate the Day of Shame with distinguished members of government, with distinguished people from academia, and distinguished people from all corners of our country. That's a major victory for the Nkrumahist movement. Finally, I'd like to say that, look, after the 1966 coup, it became a criminal offense to print, hold, or distribute Nkrumah's photograph. It became a criminal offense. After the 1966 coup, all books written by Nkrumah and about Nkrumah were burnt in bonfires on our university campuses. After the 1966 coup, those who had anything to do with the Convention People's Party dug holes and buried them. Today, we are up in public view, displaying banners with Nkrumah's photographs. We are reprinting Nkrumah's book and distributing them across the country. Nkrumah's ideas are germinating again. And we say in one loud voice that there's no force on earth that will stop the forward movement of the socialist movement of Ghana and of Nkrumah's ideas. There's no force which will stop the struggle for socialism in Ghana and Africa. There is no force which can stop us from building a united Africa under the broad banner of socialism. We will succeed by any means possible, and no force will stop us. Thank you all very much. Comrades and friends, I'm told that there is some refreshment at the back, and all of us are invited to a modest refreshment. Thank you all very much for coming.
Yeah. Africa unites, 'cause we're moving right out of Babylon, and we're going to our father's land. Yeah. How good and how pleasant it to be before God the man, to see the unification of all Africa. Yeah. Has it been said already? Let it be done. We are the children of the Rastaman. We are the children of the Ayama. Africa unites, 'cause our children wanna come home. Yeah, 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 yeah. Africa unites, 'cause we're moving right out of Babylon, and we're going to our father's land. Yeah. How good and how pleasant it to be before God the man, to see the unification of all Rasta man. Has it been said already? Let it be done. I'll tell you who we are under the sun. We are the children of the Rasta man. We are the children of the Ayama. Whoa, Africa unite. Africa unite. Unite for the benefit of your people. Unite for systems and everything. Unite for the benefit of your children. Unite for systems